had several people ask me to make a video putting together my favorite setup on the Bigfoot so that they don't get anything wrong. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to put together not just one setup, but my top 4 custom setups. And that is the Waterborne Surf Adapter, the Carver CX, the Spicegate Type X, and the Aquilo. So I'm going to walk you through all of the parts and accessories and hardware you're going to need for each of these, and we'll put these together so you know how to do it yourself on your own Bigfoot. So I'm going to start with the Waterborne Surf Adapter, which is my top favorite, but we're actually going to not start with the front truck. We're going to start with the rear truck, which is the rail adapter, because for me, regardless of these 4 setups, anyone you use, for me personally, I'm using the rail adapter on all 4 of them. It gives you deeper lean. It helps keep those back wheels on the ground, which prevents you from sliding on these long boards. So I'm always going to use the rail adapter on these long boards, and so that's where we're going to start, is installing the Waterborne rail adapter. The Waterborne kit comes with everything that you should need. You get some stickers in your kit. It looks like I've actually already opened this a little bit, but this is pretty much what it looks like when you open up a Waterborne kit. And here is the surf and rail adapters here. We'll set the surf adapter aside, and we're going to install this rail adapter first. The Waterborne also comes with these thin little riser pads, which I like to use because I think it dampens the noise a little bit. So the first thing to be aware of on this rail adapter is the orientation of it. So you're going to notice that these base plates this one has these little notches on one side, and then you turn it over to the other side and those notches are on the other side. So I have configured the wheel wells on the Bigfoot for this to be positioned with these notches on the bottom plate facing towards the nose, like so, okay? And so that's going to position your wheels on those wheel wells perfectly. Now it's possible to do other configurations. You can do it this way, which will widen your wheelbase. You can even change those plates to where they're facing in the same direction, but that creates another issue. So you'll see that these bolt holes are offset, and that's because you'll have bolts coming through here as well as through here. And when these are positioned the same way, it means that those holes are aligned, which means that you could have those screws knocking against each other. And so that's why you want to keep those offset. The stock Waterborne bushings come in 85A durometer, which is very soft, at least for my weight. And so I personally upgrade these to Riptide bushings. And so on my website, you'll find Waterborne rail adapter bushings, and you have 2 barrels and 2 cones. Your barrels go on the bottom, your cones go on the top. This really just depends on your weight. I'm at about 180, 185 right now. And so for me, that 87.5A is the sweet spot for me, but that may be different for you depending on your weight. And if you're lighter than, say, 170 or 160 or so, you may not even want to change these out. You may want to just stick with the 85A durometer, but that'll be just something you'll want to play with. Okay, so to install this, I'm going to first just take it all apart because I found that's the easiest thing to do. So, as I said, we're going to install it with the notch facing the nose, and that's going to align with those pre-threaded bolt holes like that. To do this, we want 1-inch screws, and I believe these come in the Waterborne kit. Sure enough, this is the size screw we want for those, 1 inch. And we want to use this little, it's not technically a riser pad, but I don't know, it kind of just protects your wood and dampens the noise, so I like to use it. It honestly doesn't really matter which way it's oriented on the rail adapter, but we'll put that on there. And now we will screw our rail adapter base plate on with the notches facing the nose. And when you're dealing with a new deck, you'll see that those bolts will kind of stick up a little bit because they don't have any indentations in the wood yet. So I'm just going to use a screwdriver to tighten these down. And I'm using a Phillips screwdriver because that's what comes with your Waterborne kit is Phillips. I typically like to use hex bolts, but this is what we're working with. So I'm going to just very carefully tighten these down to make them flush without damaging the wood or stripping out my bolt. And that's not going to get exactly flush, but that's going to be just fine. Our next step now is to attach our TKP truck to our top of our rail adapter plate. And before I do that, let me just make some notes on this. So the TKPs that I use are Waterborne's own, and these are 150 millimeters wide. That's the hanger width. That's this measurement here, not the axle width. So TKPs come in a wide range of sizes. Waterborne uses 150 millimeter wide hangers. And this is about a ½ inch narrower than you'll see on the Carver CX or Carver C7, or Spice TKPs are a ½ inch wider as well. But personally, I like the little bit of a narrower width on those hangers. So for me, I use 150 millimeter wide TKPs, and I just get these from Waterborne. I found that's the best. Second note is I've replaced these bushings. These are TKPs that I've already been using, and your TKPs will typically come in harder durometer bushings like between 90 and 95A, and I like to soften those up a little bit, so I go Riptide bushings in 87.5A, and these bushings are called street barrels and short street cones, and this is a very standard size for TKP trucks. These are the exact same bushings that you use for the Yao Meraki TKP trucks. So if you want to replace your TKP bushings and you look at my website, you're looking for those Yao Meraki bushings, which, as I said, they're not really for Yao Meraki, they're for TKP trucks, and that's just a standard size. Another thing to note is that I have replaced the pivot cups with Riptide pivot cups. And that is because if you don't, they will squeak. And you can get rid of that with paraffin wax shavings, but personally, I always like to replace my pivot cups because it gets rid of that squeak and I don't have to worry about it. And it seems to give me a little bit more smoother turns as well. And this is also a universal size. You're going to see that it says for Yao Meraki, but these are the exact same sizes that you use in the Waterborne TKPs as well. Now, to attach your TKP to your base plate, you're looking for, in your Waterborne kit, they have bolts that have rounded off heads. So that's these ones right here. A lot of these Waterborne bolts come with Loctite on them, and that's because they'll recommend that you use Loctite on these ones here, and that just will keep that from ever loosening. But personally, I've never had an issue with that, so I don't think that's necessary. So to attach my TKPs, I'm going to just I'll use these 4 on one of them, and I have an oddball out because I've stolen one of these, but that's all right. Now remember, we want to have this offset because we don't want to have these bolt holes aligned. So this rail adapter plate is going to go on like this, with this notch going back, and that means that our TKP needs to sit with pivot cups out or facing the tail. So our TKP is going to sit on this rail adapter plate just like so. All right, so our TKP is attached to our rail adapter, and now let's put this together. So I'll take my Riptide bushings here, and we want to put our barrels on board side, followed by our rail adapter plate, pivot cups out, followed by these little pieces here on the rail adapter to prevent from rattling, followed by our cone bushings, washers, and kingpin nuts. And I go to where that's just about flush on that kingpin. And there we have our rail adapter installed. Now we get to the Waterborne surf adapter, and you'll see that this comes with a sticker on it like so that holds those bolts in place, and that makes it a lot easier for you to install your TKP trucks on this. But before I do that, the first thing I'm going to do is replace this bushing in here, and that's because the Waterborne stock bushing comes in 95A durometer, and that's just too soft for my weight. It makes it pretty floppy. So I upgrade my Waterborne surf adapter bushings to Riptide bushing in 97.5A. That's a little bit stiffer, and that's better for my weight. And it's a bit of a process here, so I'll show you how to do it. First thing we do is we just remove the kingpin nut with a ratchet wrench. And then we can pull these apart. And then you're going to notice that inside here we have some washers and bearings. So you're going to see a stack of these in here, like so. And then you've got this larger washer here, and that goes on top of those. So we'll just set those aside. And then here's your surf adapter bushing in here. And I just used a little screwdriver like this to fish this other set of washers and bearings out like so. And we'll just set those aside. And that leaves us with this. So now we got to take this off. In some rare cases, I have found that I've been able to remove these just using channel locks, but I usually have to use a hammer to hammer out that kingpin. But let's at least give this a shot and see if I can do this with these channel locks. No, that's definitely too tight. So we're going to hammer this out. So what you want to do is you want to get your kingpin nut and you want to screw it back on over that kingpin. You don't want to hammer that or you'll damage that and you won't be able to screw that back on and your kingpin will be damaged and ruined. So you'll put your nut back onto the kingpin, just like so. And so now when we're hammering, we're going to be hammering on that nut, not on the kingpin. And I'm just on the floor of my garage here because you just need a hard surface to do this on. But you're going to just gently pound this out. And that kingpin will come out like so. And now I should be able to pull this out with the channel locks. And it's not easy, but there you go. Now we have it out. Now we're going to take our riptide bushing. And you'll notice that this has two sides to it. One, it's really sharp edges, and then the other is rounded off edges. It doesn't matter which way you put it in. It's just that when you have those rounded off edges, it can be a little bit easier to put it in like that and push that down. And then you got to just find a surface where you can pound it in from the top like so. And there you have it, waterborne surf adapter bushing replaced. My next step will be to attach the TKP to this base plate. And remember, we want pivot cups facing out, which means in this case they're going to be facing the nose, which means we want them facing this way. And you can tighten these down either with a skate tool, or if you have a bit like this on your drill, you can just do it like this. And when we pull this sticker off, you're going to see how these are configured. So you'll see how those have hex heads in there, and that's how those stay in place as you're screwing those on. So now we have our two pieces. Now let's install this on our deck. And the first thing I do is I just install these separately. I start with the top base plate. And same as on the rail adapter, we want 1-inch screws. So now let's get our pad here. And let's see, I'm going to install this like so. And same as on the rear, we're going to tighten these down carefully to press it into the wood without damaging it or stripping out our bolts. So with that piece installed, now the rest is easy to go on. First we take this bottom set of washers and bearings, that goes back in there. Then we take our other base plate, shove it on there. Oh, I should mention the waterborne fin. So you've seen me do a review of it and you know what the fin systems do. If you don't use any of these, it's on standard mode. You can change it to mega pump, which changes the angle, widens the angle like this, or you can put it on super carve, which narrows the angle like that. So that's something to play with. Personally, I always just use my waterborne on standard mode. So I don't actually ever use any of these fin pieces, but that's an option for you as well. And if you want to do that, just watch my other videos on how to install that. But this just goes over the top of that bushing, and it can be kind of hard to squeeze it on, but it'll go. Now we take our other set of washers and bearings, and then here's that big washer that goes on top, followed by our kingpin nut. And now we tighten this down. And we want to make sure that that is snug. We don't want to over tighten it. If it's too loose, then you'll have play in that surf adapter. It'll move like so. If it's too tight, then it's not going to rotate good. And I actually think this is just slightly too tight. So I'm going to back that off just a touch. And actually now that's too loose because now I have a little bit of play in that. So I was wrong. I'm going to go back a little bit tighter on that. All right. So that should be what we need on that. Now it's time for wheels and bearings, and for wheels I use 70mm 78A durometer, and that's because I want them to be big for long distance cruising, and 70mm isn't huge. I mean, there's certainly a lot bigger wheels than that, but 70mm is as big as I like to go on surf skates. And then I go 78A durometer, which is soft because I want a lot of grip, because these longboards get pretty slidey. And then as always, I use my favorite bearings of all time, G-Bomb bearings. And there's our wheels, sticky wheels. Let's see if we can pull these apart. Nice and sticky. So there you have it. This is my very favorite setup on the Bigfoot, Waterborne Surf and Rail Adapter. And now that you've seen that, I'll take this surf adapter truck off and we'll do the Carver CX next. Now let's talk about how to install the Carver CX. So the first thing you want to do when you're matching up another front truck with your rail adapter on the rear is you want to make sure that the heights line up. So to do that, what I do is I just use a level, and I'll put my other truck on front, and that tells me that we got to go up. And then I just keep putting riser pads on until I get that level, and that tells me what I need in riser pads. So in this case with the Carver CX, it's a 1/4 inch riser that you want that'll get that pretty much perfectly level. And in order to do that, you need 1.5 inch screws. So if you're using the Carver CX with the rail adapter, you want a 1/4 inch riser and 1.5 inch bolts. And as I mentioned, as far as your bushing durometer goes, you want to use 85A on the front. And I would recommend using something a little bit harder on your rear if you're using the Carver C2 rear. But I recommend that you use the rail adapter because I've tried both, and to me the rail adapter feels much better. Not only does it feel better on the rear, but it also makes it feel better on the front because it gives you more range of motion and lean out of the front truck as well. So if you're going to replace the bushings in just your front CX, then you just need a 2-pack 85A is what I would recommend for that. And then if you're using the C2 rear, go with something a little bit stiffer for the rear, maybe 87.5A, maybe even 90A. So the CX is super easy to install. Now we put on our riser pad, followed by our truck. Oh, and I put my riser pad on wrong. Let's align that up to the truck. And you don't need nuts with your bolts on the surf adapter, but you obviously do on the CX. In the case of that Waterborne surf adapter, I had to tighten from this side, but in this case, it's ideal that you tighten from the nut side. And so that's what I'm doing here, is to pull that, sink that into the wood now on the top. I'm tightening using the nut. And you'll see how that's going to pull that flush. So you can see how those 1.5 inch bolts come out just perfectly. And you can see how it looks on top there. Nice and flush. And I can probably cinch this one down a little bit more, but that's looking pretty good. And I'm assuming you don't need to watch me install those wheels again. So there's your Carver CX setup. If I were running with the Carver CX, this is exactly what I'd be running. I'd have an 85A bushing on the front with the rail adapter on the rear. Both the SpiceGate Type X and the Aquilo are super easy and straightforward to install. Literally all you need are 1-inch bolts, and those are going to go through the deck and screw directly into the truck like so. I personally don't replace the bushings in SpiceGate because I think SpiceGate comes with okay bushings. And the Aquilo bushings were absolute garbage, so I did replace those, and those are just the same. Those are a street cone and street barrel there. So if you have an Aquilo, you probably want to replace the bushing. I wasn't able to replace the pivot cup on this because it's a specific size. I wish I could because it's absolute trash. But aside from that, there's really no considerations here for these. You just need 1-inch bolts and you just screw them on. So that's it for the SpiceGate. And as far as the height goes, you don't need to put any riser pads because this is the same height as that rail adapter. The SpiceGate is designed to have a TKP with a 1-inch riser, And that's exactly what the rail adapter is a 1-inch riser essentially. So there's nothing to worry about on the height on either of these, and that's all there is to it. And I'm not even going to install this a kilo because it's the exact same thing. You just bolt it on with 1-inch bolts. So that's it. That's really all there is to it. That's the Bigfoot. Those are my favorite setups: the Waterborne Surf Adapter, the Carver CX, the Spicegate, and the Aquilo. And I hope you found this useful as you're putting together your Bigfoot. And I look forward to hearing how you put yours together and how it rides for you.